India's household debt likely surged to a record high in the final 3 months of 2023, with signs that consumers are taking to riskier borrowings. Now, household debt touched a new high of 39.1% of the GDP in October to December quarter of 2024. And while household debt is estimated to have reached its new peak, it's the non-housing loan growth more than housing loan which is a cause of concern. What does the data tell us? Well, it tells you that India households now own a large proportion of their total income as debt more than ever before. And Indians might be borrowing more for non-essential purchases like phones, laptops and watches. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And how does one read this data? To talk about that, we have Karan Mehrishi, economist, joining us on the show. Kartik continues to be with us. Karan, hi, if you can hear me, good morning. Thank you for taking time out. What are we making of this data? Is it a preliminary on the face of it? 39% of the GDP as household debt. Is it a cause of concern?
Hi, Shweta. First of all, thanks for having me. So I'll first talk about the household debt to GDP ratio among India's peers. So if you look at IMF estimates, Shweta, then BRICS. I'll take the example of the BRICS nations. Russian household debt to GDP ratio is around 22%. China's ratio is around 62%, and South Africa's ratio is around 35%. Household debt to GDP ratio among Western European and North American nations averages in the range of 65 to 70%. So India's ratio of 39% is high, but not unsustainably so, in my opinion. I am therefore with the view that India's rising indebtedness has to be looked at from 2 points of views, that is both positive and negative. From the positive point of view, Shweta, I think these rising household debt levels are pointing towards a strong consumerist force that drives India's domestic economy. Therefore, indebtedness can be associated with households' rising propensity to consume and is a function of rising demand for cars, houses, consumer durables and non-durables. This is also in line, in my opinion, with the spirit of India's domestic demand-driven economy status. But at the same time, this can also be considered as a harbinger for misery for the Indian economy. Looking at the exponential growth, as you were also pointing out earlier, in non-collateralized loans, it is clear that households are either consuming beyond their means or augmenting their income to repay previous unpaid debt. This also means that for households, persistently high interest rates have raised debt repayment costs, and the quantum of debt has risen faster than the quantum of household income. This is because household consumption expenditure as a proportion to the GDP in real terms has fallen lately. Even though there is not much data available, but I reckon that COVID-19 pandemic has probably not only reduced household incomes, but has also led to significant impairment of economic capacities, raising unemployment levels. Since India has no official unemployment metric, a lot of unorganized sector unemployment is not recorded by the system. This, along with falling savings with household liquidity as a proxy, I'm talking about here, which is of course correlated with rising debt levels, needs further study.
All right. I want to just simply break it down before I let Kartik come in here for the benefit of our larger audience. What essentially is happening here, or what I am reading into the situation, is that obviously India's propensity or India's consumption expenditure is going high, which means an average Indian like you and me wants to buy more than what our income will allow us to, and therefore we are taking on more debt. Isn't this also a reflection on the fact that we're not earning as much as we desire to, but our consumptions and our consumption patterns are telling us that we are buying a lot more than what we can afford in the interim?
So I think, Shweta, I always give this. I talk about the story of the Kuznets curve. I think you have to look at it from what Simon Kuznets suggested half a decade earlier. So Kuznets curve basically peaks at the level where a country reaches middle income status, as far as per capita incomes are concerned. So given the fact that India is now almost at the brink of middle income status, I think we have peaked as far as the Kuznets curve is concerned. When this happens, citizen participation in the political discourse rises, inequality levels that we have already been discussed so many times levels are at their peak, and nationalism is a matter of social cohesion. This is also the time when I think demonstration effect, which is also a very, very important component here, has a significant influence over citizens, and consumption is a byproduct. Therefore, I think it's also to do with India's current socio-economic status and aspirations. And probably this is a natural process of economic evolution and will run its course. So I think we have to see how things evolve from here. But at the same time, Shweta, I also want to give example of what happened in China about 15 years ago. So I always say that India is roughly 15 years behind China as far as socioeconomics is concerned. So if you read the reports, then about a decade back, young Chinese were actually selling their body parts to buy Apple products, such as Aspiration. So I think demonstration effect is now taking hold in Indian society. And I think liquidity, household liquidity generally comes down when this happens.
Okay. Shweta, I just want to add to this, while we look at this data in isolation, it seems like a big headline, 39% of the GDP is household debt. But what we are essentially doing, and that's something that Karan also alluded to, what we are essentially doing is that we are deferring the payment of buying an aspiration. Which means I'm taking a loan to buy an iPhone today, or I'm taking a loan to buy a car today. Since you mentioned most of this is non-housing debt, which means I'm not talking about a home loan just as
Not
yet.
a physical asset.
Rest of them are also physical assets, or not, depends, because they are depreciating in value. But I want to buy a car. I don't end up saving as much to buy a car on down payment. Instead, I make the purchase today and I pay for that car in equal installments. I want to buy an iPhone today. I am actually making the consumption today in this moment, contributing to the GDP and to fulfilling of my aspirations today, and paying for it subsequently in equated monthly installments. Now, what would be a cause of concern for me would be if the default rate on these loans goes up. And that, to my mind, and that's something that the chief economic advisor has also written in his Mint column today, where he's saying that the default rate on unsecured loans, which are about 1 lakh rupees or less, is less than 1%. And there are enough weights that the RBI has mandated banks to keep aside for catering to such eventuality where somebody is unable to pay this debt. So, to my mind, as long as the default rate is low, then what we are doing is we are paying later for an aspiration that we as a society are fulfilling today. And that is contributing to India's GDP growth today, rather than a build-up of savings which can lead to consumption on the day after.
Okay, so it may not necessarily be a black or a white situation, Karan. Would you agree with that from an economic point of view? And socially, I may disagree with that theory, to buy today so as to, make sure that a substantial part of your income tomorrow will go towards paying your debt. But economically, it's not that bad after all.
Absolutely, Shweta. And I totally agree with what Kartik just said. So basically, it's all about, as I was mentioning, it's about demonstration effect. So, and that's how human psychology functions. So, if you look at what consumer psychology also says, it's a Maslow's hierarchy. So you move up the value. So when your basic needs are met, then you move up the Maslow's hierarchy, and then you aspire for electronics, white goods, cars, and houses. So, for example, in Western Europe and other developed countries, the aspiration is more expensive cars, luxury lifestyle, yachts, etc. So that's how economic evolution happens, and I think India is on that course. But at the same time, there are also vulnerabilities that each nation faces when this evolution happens. And I think we have to be mindful of those. But at the same time, we should not say that India probably economically is vulnerable as far as macro stability is concerned, because I'm not really sure whether that would happen. Every nation on earth goes through this transition, and India is on that course.
All right, it looks like a transitionary phase for now. We'll come back to you with more hard data whenever that happens, Karan. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.